Andreas come on stage. Andreas, let me just introduce you because you should all know this guy is a bit of an enigma. He is like almost. I'm a young guy. He's 10 years younger or so. Incredible guy. What he has built with First Momentum is something that no one else in Europe has managed to, because you've built a student-run VC when you started. You're now all of course graduated and you're managing tens of millions of euros. And this guy, like, I didn't even manage my own apartment at that time. So incredible work. The DeepTech hardware napkin. Let me just say to everyone, like, DeepTech is completely different from anything else in venture. And the venture playbook that we have all been playing by needs to be rewritten to make DeepTech work. And that is the initiative that you, together with a bunch of other of the greatest investors in Europe, have done with the DeepTech hardware napkin. It's incredibly important work, and I really think that you should do good notes to this and go and download the report as well, for you to really be able to understand, what does a Series A company look like? What does a seed company look like? Is it okay that you have founders that are purely technical? That kind of thing. Like, this is a great framework for you to get started in deep tech investing and understanding what a good company looks like at these different stages. Andreas, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, as Andreas mentioned, I have a very brief 7 minutes to walk you through this, so I'm going to do a couple of highlights. As he mentioned, we're a specialist fund. We're specifically focused on the first round of very technical founders in very technical domains. And kind of we started the fund straight out of university with the goal to kind of tackle the funding, but also the ambition gap in deep tech. So kind of why did we start this Napkin project? As Andreas mentioned, kind of deep tech has moved definitely from kind of cottage industry to the mainstream. I mean, we have conferences like this. There's a ton of money going into deep tech, but we're missing those benchmarks and those playbooks that we have for other verticals or topics like SaaS. And I think you see this in a couple different points. So, for example, I think the most frequent complaint that founders give is VCs just tell them, it's too early, but at the same time don't really tell them like when is the right time or kind of what an investor wants to see from a company. The other point is that we as investors see way too many companies that are basically failing their fundraise, their first fundraise, even before they have started their first fundraise, just by kind of screwing up their cap table. And I think this is a function of both founders and universities, for example, not really having a benchmark for what is the industry standard on this topic. And I think one of the kind of reasons for this is also that the typical deep tech founder is just way more isolated from the overall startup ecosystem. Like the typical engineering founder probably doesn't have kind of a ton of founder friends to benchmark from. And so for us, kind of the easiest way to 10x the amount of successful deep tech companies is just to kind of build those benchmarks and those playbooks. So what is this napkin supposed to be? Is it just another VC content piece, or is there actually something useful in there? We basically took a bunch of data from our funnel, and as Andreas mentioned, also kind of crowdsourced the same information from a ton of other VCs as well, and then kind of cross-referenced this with data from Dealroom, and basically looked at valuations, round sizes, the amount of public funding that went into those companies, the team setups, as well as kind of tech and product maturity and where they are in their commercialization journey across multiple stages. There's obviously a lot of limitations in there, but kind of to have a general point of reference for both founders as well as investors, and ended up with something like this. You don't need to take a picture. There's a QR code at the end where you can download the report, but I just wanted to kind of do a couple key insights that we took from the report that you don't necessarily just see from the napkin itself. The graphs are also all in the report. So, but I think I mentioned the cap table situation. If you look at what the typical cap table looks at a Series A, you start to understand why you don't have a lot of equity to play around with before your pre-seed round, and why you should probably, as a founder, but also as an investor, have a frank conversation with the professor that wants to be an equal co-founder but is not actually operational building the company. Because I think this is the stuff that screws you over in later rounds when investors say, hey, this cap table doesn't work for us. Similarly, if you look at how the teams of those companies actually look like, you don't need to look at the specific numbers; those are all in the report. But I think what is quite interesting is to see the kind of rate of commercial co-founders in those companies is really going down round by round. So kind of if you assume subsequent rounds is a success metric, then you really have to ask, do I need that commercial co-founder if the more successful companies have less commercial co-founders? And you see kind of those commercial roles really then coming in in Series A. And I think you also see, and this was quite surprising for us, you also see this on the fundraising amounts. The gray bars is basically technical CEOs and kind of their fundraising performance. So you really see what is to be expected in a first round, probably a technical CEO first fundraising that they're ever doing. They're probably kind of raising less than if you have a McKinsey guy that has built slides and whatever. But the further you go in your fundraising journey, the more money those technical CEOs are able to raise. And so kind of just taking this as a proxy for success. So for us, this means as an advice to founders, kind of beware of local optimas. Ask yourself, do you need that commercial co-founder just because someone told you like you should have a commercial person in there? Or is this something where you have to step out of your comfort zone? Then on the kind of tech and product side, we kind of see a very clear picture where basically funding and technical and commercial milestones really kind of follow each other or kind of come in lockstep. And you see the same thing happening on the valuation and kind of that this is really a hockey stick. So the first rounds probably are underperforming what you have kind of on the multiple side, at least what you have in SaaS, but this then really starts picking up in the later stages. And the same goes for basically the amount of revenue those companies have. So founders shouldn't feel bad for not having revenue to show in the early rounds, but they also shouldn't expect that revenue basically pulls them through a fundraise later on. And I think what kind of came out of this for us is really that DeepTech founders need to think kind of even before they start raising for their first round already about what is the end state that I'm targeting for. So let's say kind of I want to build a nuclear fusion plant. Nobody's going to give me that amount of money to build this, but really kind of think through what are the milestones that I will be able to show kind of through time, and which of those milestones basically unlock the next funding that I can get, and then kind of breaking this down to what is the narrative that I have for each round, what is the data that I need to collect beforehand, what is the validation that I have to do to kind of really reverse engineer basically your fundraise way more so than what you would do with a typical SaaS company where you're just basically like, yeah, okay, I start with some customers, then I have more customers, and I kind of just show the revenue hockey stick, and this is what gets investors excited. So this for the very brief. There it is. Very brief 7 minutes. Here you can kind of get the link to the report, but you can also just go to Google and put in DeepTech Napkin. I think we're the only ones with this so far. There's similar things for SaaS, but for DeepTech, I think this is currently we're ranking on number 1 there on Google. Thank you.